And we are live now. Hello, hello. I am Jessie Pineda, and this is Stop Telling Yourself Stories, and this is the Certified Facilitator edition. And today I am honored and grateful to Kalpana Raghuraman, who is a CF, a great CF that I personally admire and like and follow everywhere. And I'm very thankful to you, Kalpana, for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Jesse. Lovely to be on.
Thank you. And I always remind our viewers that this is a show in which CFs come and tell us their story and tell us all of those things that they have told themselves through life. The stories about scarcity or drama or sadness, but not from the place of relieving them to suffer them again, but from the place in which they become an inspiration because you have been able to go past that, to forget about those things, or not necessarily forget, but to forget all of the energy or leave the energy behind of all those things, Kalpana. So today I would love for you to tell us a little bit about your childhood and where you began life.
So I was born and raised in the Netherlands,
Mhm.
Indian parents. And so I was always different because people in the neighborhood where I was raised were mostly white. And I had two Indian parents, and my mom has had her own dance school. So we had a lot of cultural things going on at home. But outside, of course, very different life. And so when you talk to me about stories, one of the things that comes up is the story of having to fit in. Now, you might recognize this if you're listening, that we have this idea often as a child that we have to fit in and we have to change and adjust ourselves to fit in. And I had this thing that when I was wherever I was living in the Netherlands, I didn't fit in because I didn't look like everybody else. I came from a different background. I was different. And when I would go to India, I would also not fit in because I would be the foreign girl, even though I was Indian. And they would laugh at my accent. So it was this idea that I don't fit anywhere. When am I going to fit in? Where will I belong? When will I finally be accepted? Was like this kind of humanoid thing. If you know access consciousness, we speak about humans and humanoids are those who are kind of always judging themselves and feel that they don't fit in and they feel that they're wrong. This was really something that was really very much up in my first, like till my end of my teenager years. And the great news is you don't have to fit in. And when I started to realize that I didn't have to choose, like I have to be Western or I have to be Dutch or I have to be Indian, I can take the best of all the worlds. That story started to literally dissolve, disappear, because it's a lie. And stories are often a lie. And when you start to see that something else is available, they cannot exist anymore because you start to see that they're not real and true. And so this is something that I went through. And when I was, end of my teen years, I started to see like, hey, wait a minute, maybe it's not so bad. Maybe I'm not so bad. Maybe I don't have to go crazy about fitting in. What if I start to take the best of all those worlds and start to choose what I want to choose? And that really allowed me to start to have very different experiences and much more ease with myself, and thereby also much more ease with other people in my life and with the world, I would say.
Mhm. Thank you so much for sharing this part of your story because I think that's one of the biggest stories that we tell ourselves. We need to fit in. And this is regardless of nationality or regardless of gender, is about everything. Every choice that we make, we are usually thinking or taking other people's points of view as reference, and we try to make ourselves fit into their reality, never thinking or never recognizing the reality that we can create for ourselves, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So
Very.
how is it that you started recognizing that you could choose everything because you were a teenager and there are certain things that a teenager cares about when, especially when you're trying to
Be
recognize
cool.
what the world means to you. Hmm.
Yeah. I think it was definitely in my home at my parents were they were encouraging me. They were actually, I chose really well. Gary always says, you chose well. So my parents were giving me a lot of encouragement. Also, like my parents were very spiritual. So they would, talk about stuff differently. We talk a lot about energy. We did meditation, blah, blah, blah. We did all this other stuff. But somehow I started to just see that if I keep looking outside, like if I'm in India, I don't fit in. If I'm in Holland, I don't fit in. That is gonna just kind of never end. And so when I started to really give myself, like in a way, the chance to discover myself, that started to dissipate and that started to change. And so I went to India for a year to just to be in India, just to have time for myself. I went to an ashram, I went to travel, I went to give myself the space, not with family, because for me, going to India was always visiting family, but then you're just visiting all the grandmothers and having food all day. It wasn't necessarily fun. And so when I went for myself alone, I started to experience my own choice and possibilities around it, and that really started to shift a lot, because I started to see, like, hey, I have my unique expression, I have my unique awareness, I have my unique choice. And so that was the beginning of a longer journey. It was the beginning of a longer journey, but taking that space for myself actually allowed me to not always be looking through somebody else's eyes, and started allowing me to start to look through my eyes. And it was not that I was like, it's not like once you're on it, you're good. It's a choice you make all the time, right? But it started to open up this space where I could start to see, hey, it's okay. Keep going.
Going. You can
Yeah.
keep choosing that. When you started to discover yourself, what were the things that you started noticing or recognizing that you hadn't seen before?
Wow. It's long ago. Like, feels like 100 lifetimes ago. Ooh, that's a hard one, Jessie. I am literally like past is really far away.
Yeah.
I think I started to see that a lot of things that I had learned were not necessarily true. I started to see that what I keep hearing myself through like your phone, your device.
I might be hearing you too.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, but I didn't mean to. Maybe I thought it was coming through like YouTube or something. Okay. I started to see that, oh, a lot of the things that are like real are like this, are not necessarily like this. So choice with relationship, choice with men, choice with my body. I really started to experience and in a way question what I had learned, and if that was really the only choice. A lot of times if you don't know, like it's like if you don't know that you can walk on legs and you've learned all your life to walk on your hands, you don't even think about walking on your legs. It's kind of like, so it was really where I started to explore what is available for me. And we go into, like, we are programmed to think about certain things as right or wrong, or this is how we do it, or this is we don't do it. And I started to slowly let go of those things. I was very much into Osho those days. I don't know if you know Osho. He's an Indian master. So I was reading his books and I got really inspired by his very rebellious, different point of view about stuff. And it was showing me that not necessarily everything I had been taught was the only possibility or was the real right thing. So it started to activate this curiosity, and it started to also, it was resonating a lot with what I always thought was weird, but everybody said it was, no, it's like this. And it really tickled me and inspired me to start to discover instead of follow. Yeah.
And I love that you mentioned Osho because one of the things that I really like about his philosophy, let's say, is
Yeah.
how including the body, it's a good thing,
Yeah.
right? That we don't need to forget about our body so we can find more or transcend or just choose more for our lives. How has your connection with your body been through the years? Or did you ever tell yourself stories about anything related to your body?
Who hasn't, right? No, definitely have. My relationship with bodies in general and with my body is maybe a bit special because my mom was a dancer and had a dance school. So She was pregnant with me and dancing a lot, performing. So there was something with the body in my life already that was maybe a bit different than, let's say, a standard situation. Because my mother was teaching, she was performing, and I was watching her. I was on stage, I think, when I was already 5. So moving with my body was something that I knew from a very young age. And so somehow this expression through my body, I mean, I was like really already doing a lot with that from a very young age. And it was something that was just normal for me. So somehow this relationship with my body was in one aspect present. There was an awareness. And then on top of that, there was all this reality stuff like, oh, I should be like this, and why am I so dark, and why am I this, and why is my stomach like this, and why is my ass like that. There was a lot of this reality stuff on top of it, but there was always this undercurrent of ease with body because I was dancing a lot. I was watching my mom with busy with all these students, and there was this energy of joy with bodies and possibilities and exploring and being curious that was really in my life, like kind of every day. So I really can say that that nurtured, even though I was, being unkind to myself with judgment. And if you know dancers, you'll know that dancers, they judge their body like crazy. But there was this undercurrent because my mom was very different with that. She was not, she was really coming from a kindness with, even when she was teaching, she would be strict maybe, but it was always coming from, I know that you can do that, not from, you're doing it wrong. So there was a very different energy, even though it wasn't always obvious, it was always there. And even yesterday, I was having an interview with somebody, and I said, it's only when I got to access that I realized that I had access to something with my body that was normal for me in some way, that I realized, oh, wow, it's actually quite special and it's quite unique. And this is really cool, and I'm really grateful for that. But yeah, so we have stories, and with dance, there's a lot of stories. Like, I'll never may be able to do a split, or oh, I can never really be as good as that dancer, or why is my body not strong enough, and I'm so tired now. So there was a lot of stories about the impossibility of what my body should do, and it wasn't possible. It wasn't working. When will it work? And judging myself. But I would say that Access really helped me see that I had this undercurrent of ease, that I could start to choose more and I could start to stop believing the stories, if that makes any sense.
And with this connection, with this new acquirement of tools, have you changed your relationship to your body in ways that you can recognize easier that you're judging it? Or how is it that you have been choosing this or using these tools?
I mean, definitely noticing when I judge myself and seeing that I don't have to, and just happier with my body, like seeing that I don't have to judge my body. And like in dance, let's say, like making certain movements in a certain way, you want to have your leg this high, or you want to make your, blah, 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 all this stuff. And noticing like it's actually not the end of the world. And the judgment thing is not really working. Like, I've tried it many years, it's not really getting me further. So it was actually like really using the tools of Access around bodies, like asking questions, asking the body, including the body. A lot of the questions I was already using, but not so like consciously, that I noticed like, oh, but I kind of do this with when I'm dancing, or I do this when I'm making a new choreography and I'm asking the body to show me, but I wasn't aware of it consciously. And so I could start to use it more consciously, and so have more ease and results in a way, like being able to move forward. I would say the biggest thing that changed is that I just became happier with myself and with my body. And I some days I might be a bit chubbier, and some days I'm more lean, some days I'm more flexible, other days I'm less, my muscles are sore. And it's kind of like it does not say anything, or it doesn't, the judgment thing has just really reduced hugely. And I just noticed that a lot of those things I recognized, like when I'm really in my zone with dance, none of that existed. And I was like, oh, I know this one. And just started to choose it more. And also the tools are there to use. We sometimes talk about it, but we don't really apply it. It's really about applying the tools. And I started to recognize that many of those were something that I had been functioning from And I started to choose it more and more by using the tools. Yeah.
And it's great that you mentioned that we have the tools and then we forget that we have them and we leave them there like in the box, just collecting dust.
With a ribbon.
With everybody and all of the titles that you get and the diplomas and everything else, but they are just left in the back. So yes, definitely about using them.
Yeah.
Y- You mentioned at the beginning that you are very lucky because of the parents that you chose very well, right? But did you have any other areas in your life in which relationships with people created stories that in which you bought yourself this idea that it was not easy connecting to people?
I mean, I think already the whole story of being different or being colored in like a not like a, was already a story that I was functioning from. I mean, with relationships, I would say that I had a story that because my father was traveling a lot when I was young, so I had the story of, oh, I only like men who don't like that, who have issues, or I only have men who don't want to be present. And I did a lot of those dramas with men. And then I realized, wait a minute, maybe I don't want a relationship. That's why I'm choosing men who don't want a relationship. So that actually cleared a lot. So yes, I did. I think I will be really curious to meet somebody who didn't do any stories with relationships. Like we kind of learned that that's the way you live. I think what changed a lot was seeing that I didn't have to do that and that I could choose something different, and seeing that those stories are stories we tell ourselves, but we don't have to tell ourselves the stories anymore. And then those stories don't exist, and then your life changes. So yeah. And also with relationships, I actually was not super interested in having, like, I had all my friends with relationships, and I was like, I like men and I like hanging out, I like engaging, but I don't need to do a relationship. It wasn't something that was very interesting to me. I also saw that people were doing relationship and not really happy. So I was like, why would you do that? So I was in this idea like, oh, and this, if you're watching, you might recognize, like, nobody will ever understand me. When will I find a man who will like me for who I am? And all this drama, like, oh, the men are only getting intimidated by me, or they only like me for one night and then they run away. So I was doing a lot of those stories. then and then I was like, maybe it's because I don't, maybe it's because something I'm choosing. And then there was a moment where I'm like, oh, I'm actually curious about like something more than just, like this. And I remember this, the toilet is a great place where you like, shower or toilet. I remember going, I'm kind of done with all these flings and maybe something more contributing. I was like, literally like, and then I met the man who's now my husband. Yeah.
This that you mentioned about not wanting a relationship, I love that part because there's so many of us who are creating all the drama of relationships of the one night stands or of the people
Never.
who leave
Yeah.
me or people who travel a lot or are never present, and we don't stop and realize or recognize that what happens is that we are choosing those types of relationships. How would you What would be your invitation to
Mm.
those people who keep choosing that or who don't turn around and recognize what we are choosing?
Well, I think it's also like recognizing that you don't have to have a relationship. It's actually like you're supposed to want one. But then if you don't want one, you will make sure it's not working because you don't want one. So kind of looking at like, hey, what if you can look at what you really want? And having a relationship isn't right. Not having a relationship isn't right either. Everything is a choice. You can be super happy alone. You can be super happy with somebody. And what is it that you want to choose? And what if the drama is not like mandatory? It looks like drama is obliged, in this reality with relationships. And it's like, is that really necessary? And is it fun for you? When I started to just ask, like, hey, is this still what I want? And I realized, like, I'm kind of done with this one. And maybe you're not. You're like, I'm totally happy with being alone. What can you choose where you don't need a permission from somebody, where you don't need to do the same story that your friends are doing, so you have something to talk about. Like, really, what is it that you want? And what if, whatever that is, what if you ask for that? If you say, I really want to have peace alone, ask for that and go for that, you know? So this one, yeah.
Of all of the tools that you use in the creation of your life, which ones are your favorites? The ones that keep you away from all the drama.
Oh God, I don't do so much drama. When I do drama, I get really tired. I'm like, oh my God. It's like my husband is very non-drama either. So if somebody's doing drama, we'll be like, oh my God, what are you doing? Like, this is boring. So that I have to say that my the drama percentage in my life has decreased extremely since Access Consciousness. Mm, one of my favorite questions in my that I use all the time is I don't know if I use it for drama because I don't or stories, but it's more like what will create the most here? What will create the most? And so then you're not looking at what is the right thing to do or what did I say that I should do? What had I promised? What did he think? It's like what's going to create the most? And that is like where you get out of, because when you go to drama and stories, you're in your mind and you're in reference points of like last time and now again and probably always, like all this stuff. And when you ask for what's going to create the most, you're actually timeless. You're just being present with now, and there is no rightness or wrongness, nothing to defend. Everything is possible. Yeah, that would be one of my go-to questions with everything. If I do get into like a bit of a drama queen mode, I either go for it like crazy. So then after 10 minutes, I'm like, I'm tired, I'm done. I don't resist it. I just turn up the volume. I'm like, okay, we're doing drama queen, okay, and I'm like, okay. Or I ask myself if I was really being myself, is this what that would look like? And then I'm like, okay, yeah, relaxing and bringing my barriers down and becoming present with what's really going on underneath, like what's the energy underneath. Also, yeah. And one of the stories that I wanted to share, if I can, before we stop, is also I was dancing, right? Like I was explaining with my mom, and I was dancing, and it was a hobby, and then it started to become more. And then I was always like, oh, what? All these people who had their company and who was touring, and I was like, oh, I wish I could do it, but it always seemed like something for others or something I could aspire for, but I couldn't see myself having that, great company with like everything and touring. And I just started to stop looking at what I was told. Like, people don't take art seriously. They'll be like, that cannot be a job. You need a real job, or, stuff like that. And those stories, I started to not resist them because I was resisting them and getting upset, but going, well, it doesn't matter what you think. I pay my bills, so it's not your problem. It's my problem. And actually allowing the desire to become stronger than the stories of impossibility. And now I have my own dance company and I'm touring and I have a light designer and I have a costume designer, music composer, and like administrator. And like I have this whole team. And it's because I didn't buy the lie of impossibility, but I just kept going. And I just want to give that to, whoever is watching or listening. Like, keep going. The stories we tell ourselves are the stories that we have to go to avoiding to fail, or being sure that you're not having a problem, or maybe otherwise you're wrong and people will make fun of you. Just go for it. Don't stop, and don't let those stories take over. Don't allow them to take over. Let that desire become louder and louder, so the other stories and the voices of those stories become softer.
That is a great invitation. I think that it is really awesome. There's something that you said that I heard of you, I guess like a month ago, about how tiring is for a star to turn down its light and look like a light bulb or something like that. It had that energy, and I love that. And it's this that you're mentioning is really turn it up, really show shine.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, thank you, Jessie. It's so funny when somebody says, you said this, you're like, I did? When did I say that?
I even made like a post, and I of course I wrote your name on it, but I loved it because
Thank
it
you.
is there's so many people who are trying to fit in and to,
That,
to turn it down so they fit in.
yeah. Yeah, and it is like imagine that you're a star and you have to pretend to be a light bulb. That takes a lot of energy to literally contract yourself into like a bulb. Like you're a star. Like it's so much energy. So if we how much do we use stories to actually contract ourselves out of all that we are into this smallness and into this very diminished like small thing. It's really hard. It's like if you play the drums, and or if you drums, I think is the easiest example, and somebody says, can you play soft? It's really hard to play soft because you have to just relax and just go. But playing soft, you get really tired because there's no relaxation. And it's nearly like when you're asked to fit in, you're supposed to play soft or, be a bulb. And it's like, ooh, that's tiring. And we use stories a lot of times to justify why we should do that or why we have no other choice. But stories are really more about having something to excuse yourself and having something to talk about and be like somebody else. It's not real, it's just story.
Kalpana, what would be the invitation that you want to be for the people around you, for the people who are listening, or the people who will listen later?
mm, well, I think what I just said, like just keep going, don't let yourself get stopped. I remember when I started my own dance company a few years ago, and the first show we had, and we had the premiere, and it was like people in the audience were crying and I was crying, and I was like, holy shit, if I would have believed those stories that I couldn't do it, this wouldn't have been created in the world. So what is it that wants to be created through you? And what if you don't allow anybody and any story to stop that? Like, will you be that unique expression? Will you allow you to be that vehicle of that energy? And that isn't about doing, but you be it. And from there, whatever action, whatever expression comes. And that's you. That is also what the world needs. We don't need more of the same. We've got a lot of the same. We've got a lot of followers. We are requiring those who are willing to be different and who are willing to shine, like you said, and who are willing to actually undo the baggage of stories so they can soar and they can fly.
Oh, thank you so much for that, Kalpana. I know that you had a long day, so I am super grateful that you did make yourself the time to come and share
You.
this part of your life with us and this invitation that you are. And I would love for you to tell us about your following creations before we close the show.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jessie. Thank you so much. I mean, I have a bunch of stuff. I'm like searching in my, I have, so I don't know if you guys know about Gary and Dane's Castle in Italy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm doing a body class there next week and I'm doing energy pulls from there. So if you cannot come to Italy, which you're invited to, of course, I'm doing 3 days of energy pulls because the castle is this beautiful space and really tapping into the energy of contribution. I mean, every piece that Gary chose is like, a piece of art filled with consciousness. So I'm doing 3 days of energy pulls from the castle starting the 22nd of May. I'm also having a Being You with Business and Creation class coming up in June because I am totally lover of creation, with my dance, with my access. So we talk about that as I'm a Being You certified facilitator. So we have that class. And one of my new favorite classes to facilitate is the Relationships Done Different class, which I am facilitating end of May, like the last weekend, the last 4 days of May, which is a class about relationships, has no prereqs, is access specialty class where I'm saying it's my new favorite class because in December, the first batch of certified facilitators that could have it as a specialty class had that specialty class certification. And Relationship Done Different is actually, we think a lot of times it's about other people. There is so much that becomes available with yourself. And from that space of trusting yourself and being vulnerable with yourself and in a way daring to be that, everything changes around you. So that's a class that I'm doing end of May. which I'm really excited about. I'm really excited about that too. Yeah. So there's a bunch of stuff. But if you go to my name.com, kalpanaraghuraman.com, you can see all the classes. There's quite a lot more than that.
That's great. I'll make sure that I write it down in the comments so people can access it.
Thank
And just a final question before we go, all of these creations, will they have translations to Spanish for the people who are interested?
Yes, yes. And if you like in the website, you can choose Spanish. And if it doesn't have Spanish, you can connect with us to ask for Spanish. Like sometimes we don't have a language, but then when people ask for it, we can create it. So we have beautiful Spanish translators there. So we can absolutely offer it in case it's not there. But I know with some of the classes, like relationships done different, I have my specialty class, Access Manipulation 101. If you want to know more drama and stories, that's a great class. Then that has Spanish. So we have Spanish coming up. Thank you, Jessie, for that specification. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time and for the gift of you, Kalpana. Thank you for being here in Stop Telling Yourself Stories. To all of the people who were with us today and the people who will watch this later, thank you for being here with us and part of the energy of this creation.
Thank
And
you.
super grateful to you. I'll send you a big hug.
Really warm, big hug to Mexico and to you. And adios. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kalpana. Good night to you.
Good night. Bye.